All right, we'll get rolling right away. We're going to start off with probation and parole today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I know they got, at least one of them might have a background that really interests you and how she got started in the criminal justice field. So you guys can take it away.
Hi, my name is Lisa Switlick. I've been an agent with the Wisconsin Department of Corrections for a little over 18 months now. I graduated from WCTC with a degree in criminal justice and a degree in human services in May of last year. So I got hired with the department during my last semester, had to do a lot of independent studies to finish up the semester while I was also going through the training period for becoming an agent. Luckily, I graduated WCTC right around the time that I started having my own caseload. To be honest, I'm not sure how I would have done school and a caseload at the same time had I already finished the training for becoming an agent. So throughout this presentation today, we will talk about the qualifications that are required to become an agent, what the training looked like. Keep in mind that this PowerPoint was created last year or earlier this year, pre-COVID, and the qualifications and the training I went through were from last year. Obviously with COVID, training has changed a lot. Having already been an agent, I don't really know exactly what the department is doing for training. I've heard some things, so we can kind of talk about what I've been told the department is doing if you are interested in becoming an agent and the training that's involved in that and how it will be different from the training I had versus the training that they're doing now with COVID. I am an agent that has a generic caseload. What that means is outside of Act 100, which we'll talk about later, and sex offenders, my caseload consists of anyone. So we've got DV, we've got criminal damage to property, probation, parole, extended supervision. I supervise anyone that's on supervision as long as they're not Act 100 and as long as they're not sex offender.
Hi, I'm Julie Martins. I have been an agent with the Department of Corrections for 26 years, so a lot of experience. I started the job back in 1994 and was an agent down in Milwaukee on 6th and Walnut, and then was able to transfer out to Waukesha in 1997, and I've been at the Waukesha office since then. I got into this line of work. Initially, I was actually going to go to become a police officer, and actually had application in hand for Waukesha PD when I gave it a little bit more thought and realized that just with being married and wanting to have a family, I really put some thought into, do I really want to go ahead and have to work nights, weekends, holidays? Wanted to have more family time. So I actually opted to go to the corrections route. For those reasons. I do have a double major in law enforcement and corrections from Mankato State in Minnesota. And in Waukesha, I do have a generic caseload with an OWI specialty, so I supervise the Act 100 cases, which are OWI 2s and 3s. You talked about the other specialties.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess before I continue, one thing I forgot to mention is that I'm an agent out of Kenosha County. So I'm not in Waukesha County, I'm out of Kenosha County. All right. You have the clicker.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sleep on that.
All right, so I guess we'll start with the application process. How many have looked at the WISC Jobs website before? Does anybody know how that works? No? Okay. With jobs, you have to create an account. The search is pretty simple. If you search for probation and parole, it's going to offer you a statewide application. So what you end up doing is you upload your cover letter and resume. You select the regions that you are willing to work for. So when I applied, I selected Milwaukee, Waukesha, and Kenosha. I just happened to get called from Kenosha County. You can select more than one. I don't know if they have a max on how many counties you can select when you're applying. I would say it's pretty high up there though, so you can select multiple. And then they ask you a series of questions and you have to acknowledge them. One thing when you become an agent is during training you have to be exposed to OC spray. So you have to acknowledge that you're willing to be exposed to that and that you're willing to go to Madison for 7 weeks of training. Like I said, I don't know if they're actually having new agents go to Madison or if it's just all remote and how that looks, if you have to be in your field office or if it's from home. But I had 7 weeks of training with 2 field weeks, so a total of 9 weeks. The field weeks are when you go back to your office. You still don't have a caseload, but you can start interacting with the agents more that you work with, and you're able to kind of take over some of their job duties. You're able to ask them what you can do, so that way you get that hands-on experience while you're in training. The first field week I had, I believe, was about 4 weeks into training, so basically had all the basics covered for what was expected of an agent, and then we went back and we went a little bit more into depth in the specialties and the revocation hearings, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. And then you had another field week, and then it was just kind of a wrap-up. If I recall correctly, after the second field week was when you were doing the self-defense and the exposure to OC. So kind of different than the majority of the training. Majority of the training focuses on not only what you do on a daily basis, but it also incorporates a lot of training for motivational interviewing, which is a big part of our job duty now, because you're supposed to be using it with every single client that you work with. So on average, I don't know if your points are different, but I would say I have approximately 25 to 30 active clients. And by active, I mean that they're reporting into me on a regular basis. And I'll go over in a little bit how often they report to us. It varies based on what level they're at for supervision. So that's kind of what the training incorporates. But like I said, it may have changed. The education requirements when I applied was education, training, and/or experience in the correctional field. At one point, I believe they did require a bachelor's degree, and then I was told it went down to an associate's degree, and now they've changed it to that. And according to my check yesterday, it's still remained the same. If you do have the training, education, and/or experience, and you are qualified, you would start out as just an entry-level agent. If you have 3 or more years of correctional experience and you meet the requirements, you have the opportunity to start out as a senior agent, which obviously would be the difference in pay. And then, let's see here. Oh yeah, and then senior agents also have to have experience with non-secure detention transports as well as secure detention transports, and we can talk about that a little bit later as well. Agent basic training I kind of already went through. So there's classroom training, there's hands-on experience. In terms of self-defense, you work with trainers and then you get exposed to the OC. I promise it's not as bad. I don't know if anybody's been exposed to OC. Everyone reacts differently. So a couple classmates of mine did not do so well, and by did not do so well, I mean they thought they were going to pass out. I was one that I didn't get the effects right away. It took about 10 minutes, so I thought I was one of the 5% that wouldn't react to OC. That wasn't the case, though, so was not expecting that reaction 10 minutes after I was actually exposed. When you are exposed to OC, though, like I said, I don't know who's all been exposed to it in the past. The best piece of advice I can give you is to make sure you try and blink. Keep your eyes open. They don't allow water initially. You got to kind of get over the effects of it on your own. You can get a dry paper towel. But then we have Red Man. Does anyone know where Red Man is when you're doing self-defense? All right, so basically it's just this guy. He's going to have this cushion. You have to be able to do 3 of the self-defense tactics that you've been trained on leading up to the OC exposure on Red Man. So like I said, it's just one of the trainers in a suit. You have to be able to do the repetition 3 times while you're not able to see, and that's obviously when you spray the OC, you risk being exposed to it. So if you're in the field and you do need to use the OC, there's a chance that it may affect you, and you need to know how to defend yourself given that that may happen in the field, because at the point that you're deploying the OC, there's a reason for it. You're not going to do it on a compliant client that you're going to see in the home visit or even somebody in the community when you're out and about. So you want to make sure, one, that you know when it's justified to use OC, and that you also know how to defend yourself if you, for whatever reason, are exposed to it by happenstance and you're not able to see it for those moments that you're trying to get away from your attacker.
And I was one in my ABT class when we went through the OC spray. I was on the opposite end that she was on. I was one of the ones that really responded. I had a really bad effect with the OC. I mean, it did what it had to do on me, and it was like the worst experience ever that I've had. So everybody does react differently, we were told, and it's a good thing to keep in mind that just because you use that OC, it does not mean that is going to stop the attacker. People are able to fight through it. Everybody just reacts differently, so you don't know how somebody's going to respond to it.
And if you don't know if somebody's on something, and by that I mean typically a substance, and they are not affected by it, that's something that that the trainers also work with you on, and how to kind of realize that it might not work. And like I said, I believe last statistic was 5% of the population it doesn't have any effect on at all. So they can be exposed to it all day long and they're going to be just fine. All right, do you want to talk about a typical day?
So for us, a typical daily typical day for us looks like, I've always compared it to just having an adult babysitting job, essentially, in really common terms. We enforce the court order. The judge will have conditions on the court order for like maintaining absolute sobriety, finding employment, having to go to school, paying restitution, supervision fees, and any type of treatment referrals that the agent deems necessary. So for me, we make sure we enforce the court order, make the referrals, and then follow through with contacts with employers, with treatment providers to make sure people are attending like they're supposed to be attending. We do random urine screens, and a lot of this is, things have changed with the COVID pandemic that we're going through right now, so our job duties have changed just a little bit because a lot of us are working remotely right now, not having that face-to-face client interaction in the office with the ability to do a lot of the UA. So things have changed a little bit just because of COVID. In addition to the office visits that we have normally with our people, we also do home visits, both unscheduled and scheduled home visits. We'll do employment checks, collateral checks with family members, with treatment providers, reach out to victims to find out if they've been having contact with them, if they're court ordered to have no contact. We also do our own custodies. We will take people into custody from our office for violations of supervision. We do transports to and from in Waukesha County. I don't know if it's different where you're at, but in Waukesha County, we'll do transports to and from the Waukesha County Jail right from our office. We also do transports to the institutions where we'll take offenders from the Waukesha County Jail to an institution-based program. If they're going to be receiving some type of treatment, instead of being revoked, they're going to get an alternative to revocation. Sometimes those programs are within a DAI institution. So we will do transports from the Waukesha County Jail to TCI, to DCI, to whatever the institution is that they have programming at. Like I mentioned, we do place clients in custody for violations. Custodies do take place from our office. We do our own handcuffing. We do our own pat-downs, our own searches. We investigate the violations when they come up. We get statements from everybody when we place them into custody. One unique thing with probation and parole versus law enforcement, our offenders have to talk to us. With law enforcement, they can tell the officer, you know what, I don't want to talk to you, I want a lawyer. With us, they cannot do that. They have to give us a statement when there's violations. They cannot lawyer up and say, I don't want to talk to you, because if they do that, that's a violation of their supervision as well. When we do the investigations, like I said, we get statements from the offender. We reach out to the police departments, to the officers involved, get copies of their reports. We also then want to reach out to any victims that there may or may not be, or witnesses. So it's a pretty lengthy investigation process that we do. After we get everything that we need, we staff the violations with a supervisor and then make decisions as to how we're going to proceed. Custody outcomes can be anything from just a simple verbal warning, don't do that again, to disciplinary custody, where we're going to maybe have you spend the weekend in jail or the next 4 weekends in jail. We also have been doing a lot of sanctions lately, where we can impose up to 90 days in custody for that violation. Worst case scenario for anybody that's on supervision is a revocation, meaning that their supervision gets revoked. So if they're on probation supervision, they would get revoked and have to do time in the county jail. If they are on for a felony offense and have prison time hanging over their head, or if they are, have come out of the institution and are on supervision in the community, they are on parole supervision or extended supervision. And they're obviously looking at more time on a revocation. Another unique thing about our job is we can do searches, and again, it's different from law enforcement. Law enforcement needs to have a search warrant to do those. For the Department of Corrections and as agents, we do not have to have a search warrant. Obviously, that's something that has been very highly contested throughout the years. A lot of actions taken and filed in the Supreme Court because of just how much power that we have to do those warrantless searches. It's one of those things that we want to make sure that we're not abusing that, because it's something that we can easily lose. And obviously it's very valuable to have that ability to do a warrantless search. I may have mentioned we do home visits. Not only do we do scheduled home visits, which I personally find really, I don't see really the point in doing a scheduled home visit, because people know that I'm coming by, you know, and if they're smart, they're not going to have their drugs out or their paraphernalia out or stuff like that. I find more benefit in doing unscheduled home visits, and that is something that I have done throughout the years. When I was working in Waukesha, I worked hand in hand with the Waukesha Police Department out of the Waukesha Police Substation, and for several years we would go out and do unscheduled home visits and bar checks. We would work non-traditional hours. At first, that created a huge uproar in Waukesha County. Our supervisors were getting calls all the time, like, what's the agent doing at my house at 10 o'clock at night? And it got explained to them that, hey, you're not on supervision just Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You're on supervision 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So doing unscheduled home visits, I feel, is very productive. Obviously, for obvious reasons. They don't know we're coming by, you know, and the amount of stuff that you walk into is unbelievable because of that aspect of it. They don't know that we're going to be stopping by. When we do the unscheduled home visits, though, obviously it's during non-traditional hours. There is a safety element to that, and we go hand in hand with law enforcement. I mentioned, you know, years ago I was doing it in Waukesha with Waukesha PD. Right now I currently supervise the Lake Country area, and I work out of the Heartland Police Department 1 day a week. Again, that was pre-COVID. Haven't been back since, but I'll be returning to that. We do unscheduled home visits with Heartland PD as well. So I think that's, you know, to me that's fun. I like that, especially, you know, kind of gives me that law enforcement part that I initially was going to go into before I decided to go the corrections route. In addition to the unscheduled home visits and the bar checks, like I mentioned, we do our own UAs. We do those in the office. They're observed UAs. As you can imagine, people try a lot of things to try to skirt around that system.
We had a female who had a 5-hour energy bottle, and she put urine in it and had tinfoil wrapped around it. So she said that she was having trouble, but sure enough, the agent heard the pop of the tinfoil and then heard the urine coming into a cup. So that was definitely a custody situation in the end when you're tampering with a UA. So yes, even though they are observed, clients try and get away with whatever they can for as long as they can until they're caught.
We've had a couple where we had a male offender bring in a Whizzinator. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what those are. Fake penis with a bag that had the clean urine in, and when the urine screen is observed, you know, you're standing there, you're able. Let me just clarify that. So for a male offender, it's a male agent with a male offender. Females are with females. So the male agent is in the bathroom with the offender, and obviously, I mean, those things look pretty real. I've had females that have also put urine in a balloon and stuff the balloon up, and they use the fingernail to pop the balloon when they have the urine cup down there to provide that sample. So people get super creative, and the amount of stories, I think that we would have a lot to share, but they get super creative with how they want to try to skirt around that UA. Yep. We also do breathalyzers in the office. We enforce the no contact orders, we have contacts with victims, we do the referrals for the treatment, the AODA treatment, domestic violence treatment, anger management, assessments, community service hours. We set up court reviews if offenders are not being compliant with their supervision. And the other thing that we do, worst case scenario for anybody that's on supervision is a revocation hearing, meaning that we are going to revoke their supervision, either send them to jail for a misdemeanor offense or to prison for a felony offense.
Just to touch on a couple things. So each region does things differently, and I think it really, in the end, boils down to what office you're at as well. So the office that I'm at in Kenosha, we have law enforcement do all of our custodies. They do all the searches, they do all the custodies. When we know that somebody's going into custody, we have them wait out in the waiting room. Yes, people have taken off when the wait gets too long and they pretty much know that they're going into custody. We don't chase after them. We just issue a warrant then, and they'll get taken into custody when law enforcement comes in contact with them in the community. When they don't leave, though, we call dispatch and just let them know that we need assistance with a custody. Kenosha PD has been phenomenal. We have a great working relationship with them, so every single custody I've had to do, almost, I think every custody in the last year and a half that other agents have had to do, KPD has come out and done them for us. They take them to the jail. So then when we do a custody though, so let's say we do a transport. So I recently had a client picked up in Ozaukee County. I'm in Kenosha. So we have transport agents that go with us. Because it was a female offender, I did have to accompany the transport sergeant. We went up to Ozaukee County because she was going to Kenosha County Jail from Ozaukee County Jail. She was secured, so she had handcuffs and shackles. We put them on in the jail, and then we have certain techniques that we use, so like arm on the elbow to make sure they don't try and get away, to the van that we use, and then we take them to KCJ, and then we retrieve our handcuffs and shackles. Now, if we were going to have a client go to, let me think here, a treatment facility, what's one around here? Cephas House. So let's say they were in custody and they're going for an alternative to revocation, so we do offer those as well. So, hey, there's enough to revoke you, but we're going to give you this option to go get treatment instead. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Cephas House. They deal with high-risk AODA clients. So from custody to Cephas House, the clients, it would be a non-secure because they are not going to be handcuffed. They're just in the back of the van, and then they come out. So we don't have to handcuff them to the treatment facility.
Did you want to talk about the rev hearings?
Yeah, so rev hearings, you receive, I want to say it's about a full week of training when you do agent basic training on rev hearings. I will be honest, that is not enough. We don't have attorneys representing us. So rev hearings, first off, they're not held at the courthouse. They're held at the county jail. So for Kenosha County, we have Kenosha County Jail and Kenosha County Detention Center. My office is right next to the detention center, and that's where all of the revocation hearings are held. So they're held in a room. You have an administrative law judge there. For the department, you have the agent. That's it. Like I said, we represent ourselves. We ask the questions. We subpoena any witnesses and any police officers that are needed to present our case to the ALJ. The client will be in custody. If it's an in-custody revocation, they will be in custody at KCDC. They'll be brought in, and they have the right to an attorney. So when you go to a revocation hearing, you have to remember that agents, we don't have a law degree. You're dealing with an actual defense attorney. So they try and pull their tricks on you and try and make you seem, unfortunately at times, that you were an incompetent agent. And you have to be able to justify why you did and what you did on that case to answer their questions. So once you do the revocation hearing, if it's not adjourned, which it often is, so a lot of times defense attorneys will say, oh, I didn't get the packet in enough time from the agent, so I don't have enough time to go through the packet before the hearing, which is scheduled for tomorrow. Can we adjourn it for a later date? So that happens a lot. Typically, if you only have a couple witnesses, they're only going to schedule an hour-long revocation hearing. As the agent, it is your responsibility to know whether or not you're going to be able to complete the hearing in an hour. If you feel like you have like 5 witnesses and you have to ask them a lot of questions and you know the defense attorney is going to be asking questions, it would be wise to schedule a 2-hour block. That way it doesn't have to be continued. So if you don't finish the revocation hearing in that hour block, a lot of times it'll be continued for a later date and you'll have to go back and resubpoena witnesses that you weren't able to call to testify. And then when that's done, the ALJ will gather all the evidence and make a determination. So then it's kind of out of your hands. You can, so let's say somebody's found not revoked, you can, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a mind blank.
ATR.
No, kind of argue why they should be revoked, and then that would go to Brian Hayes, I believe
File an
is.
appeal.
Yeah, file an appeal. I don't know why I was having a mind blank. So you can file an appeal. That would go to Brian Hayes. I believe he does all the appeals and he deals with the administrative side of that. So once that's done, if they are revoked, if they have already used some of their time, so let's say they came out from prison, they're on extended supervision or parole, you have to make sure you know how much time is remaining. You do make a recommendation for that time. The ALJ can either give more, less, or the same amount that you recommended, and then the client, if they are revoked, will go back to prison. Or if they had a withheld sentence and are on probation, they have to go back in front of the courts to get a sentence. The big thing is, and I don't think it's on this slide, probation is a privilege, it's not a sentence. So I think that that's really important to know. A lot of times judges, I find, at least for Kenosha, they do withheld. So let's say somebody's got a Class B misdemeanor and the max confinement time is 90 days in jail. They'll do a withheld sentence and place the person on supervision for 1 year. So if the person successfully completes supervision, they'll never find out what their sentence was, in essence. I mean, they know they can serve up to 90 days, but let's say they are revoked on that Class B misdemeanor and they go back in front of the courts, the judge can give them, 60 days and call it good, and then they're done. The thing with when you go to prison, though, is if they're not taking all of their time, which they typically don't, they are going to come back out to you. So right now, I recently revoked a client who had a sentence of 3 years incarcerated, 3 years extended supervision. Once he completes the 3 years, he's going to come back out, and if I'm still in Kenosha, I will be his agent. So I think that's really important too, where the work and relationship comes in with them. You do develop that rapport. Obviously, sometimes when you revoke someone, they don't like you, and they make it clear that they don't like you. So trying to reestablish that rapport with them and make it known, and I think that's where motivational interviewing can be really beneficial. So when we do our contact standards, motivational interviewing is huge. We do worksheets now. We talk to them. We're not just seeking violations. So every time a client has a violation, it doesn't automatically result in a custody. Recently, I had someone who started using meth. It was not good. I will just tell you that, trying to maintain their confidentiality as well and not give specifics. It was bad. With everything going on with COVID, should it have been a custody? Probably. We chose to do treatment. But a big part of that is asking them, hey, what's going on? What led up to this use? What was going on in your life around that time? And trying to work on those other needs that they may have. Because let's be honest, putting somebody in custody for a couple days for meth use, is it really going to solve the problem or, keep them sober? More often than not, it's not going to do anything, and they'll just go back out in the community and continue to use meth. And that's just the truth. So motivational interviewing is huge in figuring out how we can best serve them as well. It's been really beneficial. I know some agents who have been there longer, they didn't do motivational interviewing many years ago. So being an agent that has been trained on it right from the get-go of agent basic training has been beneficial in terms of you kind of get clients who have been bounced around from agent to agent, and they're not used to that technique or that style necessarily, especially if they've been on supervision for I think my longest has been on for 30 years, off and on, most of the time on. So, when I told him he was going to Racine and he would have to transfer, he started crying because he didn't want a new agent, because he said that I was the first agent that listened to him. And it's not necessarily that the other agents didn't listen. It was because we really are focused on motivational interviewing, and we are focused on their needs. So a lot of times the driver is in substance abuse. The driver may be antisocial cognition, or antisocial personality. So then you try and get them the treatment that they need for that. So we do, like Julie talked about, we do have a lot of groups that we send them to. One of the big ones is cognitive behavioral therapy, and that focuses on more of the deep-rooted issues that are going on with them and teaches them skills, how to deal with situations. And a lot of times clients don't want anything to do with that program, and it's fine. I mean, let's be honest, they didn't seek it out themselves. We're telling them that, hey, you got some violations, this is what we're directing you to do. And they don't want to be there. But there are a good handful of clients, too, that take advantage of it, and I can tell you that when the client wants to make a change, it works. And I've seen a client go from on the brink of revocation on my caseload to now, I swear he could probably teach somebody, teach some of my other clients some things. And he's to the point where he's realized that these skills that he learned in group were actually, he's using them without thinking about it. And so he doesn't know he's using them until after the situation's over. And he'll call me to check in because we're doing FaceTime or Google Duo appointments right now. And he'll just be so excited, and he'll be like, Lisa, I did this and I didn't end up in custody. And a year ago, I would have been in custody because I would have put my hands on her. So some of them get really excited when they realize that the group is working. So even though a lot of times you may feel like it's not doing anything, you get a couple of the clients that you see that, yeah, it really does benefit them.
And sorry.
Can you just reiterate what the goal of motivational interviewing is?
To sum it up in layman's terms. I would say the primary goal is, trying to think of how to word this right. To get them to see that they can make decisions for themselves and they don't always have to be bad decisions, is huge. So when they say, hey, I don't know, or I want to do this, what do you think? Well, it's not my life. I'm your agent, but this isn't my life. So with motivational interviewing, you kind of throw it back on them. Well, what do you think? And then you kind of go through the decision-making process that they have, and you can kind of stop them at some point and kind of lead them in the right direction by asking more open-ended questions. So they, in essence, get to make the decision for themselves as opposed to agents telling them what to do.
And that's what studies are showing, is that they have a lot of evidence-based practices going on right now, showing that how key motivational interviewing is, the verbal communication, and to, like Lisa was saying, let them feel, because you can when you're talking to them about a situation, you can see where they're going with it, and you can pick up on, like, wow, that's kind of not the right way to handle that. That's kind of a messed up thought pattern. And, instead of telling them what to do, they're more receptive if you lead them to think that they're coming up with their idea on their own, So it's all about asking those questions and how to ask those questions to kind of get them to where you want them to go anyway.
And it prevents the agent and the client from getting into an argument match. Trust me, I've seen agents go back and forth for 15 minutes with a client in a half-hour appointment, 25 to a half-hour appointment, arguing about whether or not the client was at Spanky's Bar and Grill. Does it really matter if they were at Spanky's Bar and Grill? Are you going to be putting them in custody because they went to the bar and had a beer? No. So what led up to them deciding to go to Spanky's Bar and Grill? Where did that decision making come from that led them up to that point? I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't personal for us, it's professional. So, I mean, to sit there and argue with somebody, it does nothing. It doesn't benefit them and it doesn't benefit you. As an agent, you know that you have that higher level of power. They know that. You don't need to reinforce that by arguing with them, trying to get them to say, yes, I went to Spanky's Bar and Grill. If you're not putting them in custody and it's not going to be on a statement report, then it really doesn't have any bearing And it can be, your time can better be spent focusing on, okay, so you had a stressful day at work, so you decided to go to Spanky's Bar and Grill. Let's focus on the stressful day at work, and let's focus on some skills you can use in the future to help you make better decisions, so that way you don't go to Spanky's Bar and Grill, and maybe you stay home and spend time with your kids, or you go for a walk, or you read a book, whatever works for them. These aren't just cases, these are human beings, and I think that that's really important as an agent to remember.
Yeah, as an agent, verbal communication is really key, because you find yourself in a lot of situations. When we're going out to do out in the field and we're doing scheduled home visits, we normally don't have law enforcement with us. It is recommended that we bring another agent with us, just to have, that you're paired up in partners. But not always does that happen. So you're going out, when you think about it, you're going out into their homes, their turf, and you're taught that if there is a violation, you're not going to confront the situation at their home on their turf, because we're going to bring them back into where it is safe for us. We're going to call them, tell them they have to report to our office the next day. But as an agent, you do find yourself in situations we're unarmed. The most I can carry with me is pepper spray. Officers really think we're crazy going into offenders' homes with pepper spray. No gun, nothing else, not necessarily a partner with us. So being able to communicate with them is huge. And when I started out as an agent, like I said, I was initially going into the law enforcement aspect of it. I did not get into this job to be a social worker. The pendulum swings with the Department of Corrections depending on who's in office and where the department's heading. Right now, when I started, it was more corrections-based, more law enforcement-based. Now it has really swung over to the social work side, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it's not. There's a lot of evidence showing that what we're doing now works. Our goal is to prevent the recidivism, to drive down the cost of confining somebody, to not have as many people locked up. But for me, I had to learn the motivational interviewing, because I was not taught that when I started. That was 26 years ago. We didn't do that then. And to be able to go through that training and to learn the motivational interviewing and those techniques that go along with it, it takes a lot, and it was hard for me. When you talk about some agents arguing, I'd maybe be the one in the office arguing more with my offender than trying to do the motivational interviewing, but I've had to come around and to understand and to know how to do that. And it is very beneficial. But we do homework assignments with our people. We give them worksheets, and never in my life did I think as an agent I would be doing something like that with my offenders.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's kind of hard, because when you grow up in a normal upbringing, you have both sets of parents, you come from a relatively stable family, good upbringing, it's hard to realize that, wow, maybe somebody didn't have that. Somebody maybe didn't have that mom or that dad in their life to kind of direct them and to help them and to just to be there to guide them. So sometimes it's hard to understand why that person doesn't get this. But going through the motivational interviewing and doing the stuff that we're doing now, it's sad at times to see that some people just didn't have that growing up.
Some things I think that we should touch on too is when we talk about motivational interviewing, evidence-based practices, meeting with clients on a regular basis. How often we meet with our clients depends upon their risk level and their needs as well. So we have, our Act 100s once a week starting off. Yep. So enhanced supervision would be sex offenders, and then at some point Act 100s, I think they can go down to, okay. Yep. Yeah, they can go down. So that would be once a week they have to meet with you. And then you have maximum. So almost everyone who's being released from prison, so on parole or extended supervision, will be seen every other week or twice a month to begin with. If the person has a high risk score, so we go on a scale of 0 to 10, let's say that. So high risk would be that they're more on like the 8 to 10 range for general recidivism risks, their likelihood to reoffend within the community within 2 years, as well as violent, we measure violent recidivism risk, so a violent offense in the community within 2 years. that would really kind of drive somebody to be seen at maximum, which is the every other week. Then we have medium level supervision, which is once a month, so they report into us once a month. And then we have minimum level supervision, so if a client is doing really well on supervision, they do have the opportunity to go down to minimum, which is once every 3 months. Once they're at minimum, if they are on probation, if they serve at least 50% of their probation term, and they're on minimum level supervision, no violations, they're stable. They also have the opportunity to be released from supervision early. So they don't have to necessarily complete all 3 years of probation or all 2 years of probation. They can maybe have it knocked down to 1 or 2 years, but then that has to go through the court process. We do case supervision reviews every 6 months with the clients. So if they're, let's say they have a lot of violations or their stability factors are just not great, you can bump them up so they can go from medium to maximum. If a maximum client is doing really well, typically what I find is that maximum, they stay there for more than 6 months typically. So I've had somebody who's been at maximum doing well, but the case supervision review says to maintain the maximum level supervision because they lack some stability in terms of employment and housing and things like that. So every 6 months we do that. It'll either have you maintain it, bring it down, or raise it up. You can also do a case supervision review if you do have the violations, if they have new charges or significant violations, you can do another one to increase their level of supervision as well. So it's never just once you're on maximum, you stay on maximum until you discharge. That's not the case. We want to see our clients do well, and we want to see them gain that stability so that they can report to us less. And that way, when they are done with supervision, hopefully it's not as much of a shock to them. Because we do have some clients who, I actually was just talking to a client. He said, I want to go back to prison. Lisa, can I go back to prison? I'm comfortable there. And I said, well, that's not the goal here. So some of them are comfortable on supervision, some in prison and on supervision. One client that an agent had recently discharged said, what crime can I commit to make sure I'm put back on supervision? So he didn't want to go to prison, but he wanted to be put back on probation. So he said, hey, you got any insight on what crimes I commit that'll give me a probation sentence, not a prison sentence? And the agent was just kind of like, wait, what? That's not the goal of this. The goal of this is that once you're successful and you complete supervision, you can remain successful in the community without having to report to an agent.
I think it's kind of important to also touch on just kind of the likes and dislikes of the job. I mean, I got 26 years worth of experience versus your 18 months, so I don't really want to influence you, but
Yeah.
As far as, the job, like I said, I was going to go into law enforcement, but with the Department of Corrections job and being a probation and parole agent, there is so much flexibility on that job. I know flexibility that I would not have had if I was going into to become a police officer. With our job, like I said, we don't work nights, we don't work weekends, we don't work holidays. So it's Monday through Friday. They have a very flexible, at least in our office, and I think it does vary by the office that you're in and region, but there is a lot of flexibility there. I can work 4 10-hour days if I wanted. I can set my hours for Monday through Friday. If I want to work 7:45 to 4:30, I can. If I want to start at 7:30 and go until 3 o'clock, I can do that as well. So a lot of flexibility, and that's important when you do have a family and you want to be around for that. The other thing is our pay is, I don't even know what they start out as.
$19.98 an hour is what they start out at now.
Okay, so pay isn't, it's decent. You have to factor in addition to just the straight out pay, you have to factor in all the benefits. As a state employee, I can tell you that the benefits are huge. Right now, they're starting at 19. Right now, I'm at $28.50 an hour. So I haven't went up a whole heck of a lot in 26 years, but the benefits that go along with that, you get paid vacation. I'd say right now, and that is based on seniority, the longer you work with the state, the more vacation time you get. Right now, I'm about up to 8 weeks of paid vacation. I don't know, what are you at?
Not bad. No, it's still plenty though. My first year, I was able to roll over 40 hours. So a whole week's worth of vacation, and you have to use it by July of the next year or June of the next year. I have plenty that I'm one of those that I don't miss a lot of work. but vacation time, because I don't have that seniority, I'm not going to get the holidays off. So I typically don't put in like the year prior for what days I want off, because I know I'm not going to get them anyway. I think right now we have a couple agents that are under 5, but majority are like 10 plus. So for me to get up to that point where I could take a holiday off is going to be a few years if I stay at the office I'm at.
Holidays were closed, but like the time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
around-
Yeah, like there's like set times of the holiday time that
like during
agents
Christmas,
take
between
off.
like Christmas and New Year's, almost
Yeah.
everybody with more seniority takes off.
You're down to minimal
Yep.
office coverage. But I mean, I had trouble using all mine my first year, and I'm still to the point now. It's going to be October, and I have, I think, over 2 weeks of vacation I have to use yet. So I think they start right around 3-ish weeks.
Okay.
Right around there. But then you get personal time.
You have accrued sick time.
Yep.
Your sick time builds. Every pay period, you accrue 5.5 hours. It rolls over from year to year. A perk with that is that's what I'm going to use when I retire to go ahead and pay for my health insurance. That the state of Wisconsin will match on my unused sick time that I have accrued up to, I think now they're probably up to 2,000 hours that they'll match for
I
us.
think that's what.
And that money then goes to pay for my insurance when I retire. The big thing with us is that when we had a union in the state of Wisconsin, they were able to get the Department of Corrections and Probation and Parole agent protective status, which is just what law enforcement has. Because of the nature of the job and the hazards that go along with it, we have the ability to have that early retirement that law enforcement has, which is huge. Early retirement for us, you have to meet two requirements. You have to have 25 years of service in, and then you have to meet the age requirement of 53. So after 25 years and reaching age 53, you're able to retire with full benefits from your job, which really nowadays is a young age to be able to retire. When I reach that point, I'll be making, it's not going to pay for me to continue to work, because I'm going to be making just as much as I was working, and then when I draw that on my retirement. Another thing with our job is job security. Kind of goes without saying. I mean, we don't have layoffs. The job demands are there. The criminals are always going to be there. We're always going to have a job.
I don't think any agents were furloughed with COVID either. So yeah,
Nope.
no, I mean, I think there was a lot of agents were worried that you would have to take some furlough days, but the department has been great about, nope, we're going to let you work from home. Actually, agents aren't taking vacation time, so there's a lot of talk about, hey, you got to take some time off too. But the department is really big on wellness for agents. When you have a caseload, sometimes it can blow up, and by blow up I mean at one point I think I had 9 people in custody that I had to do investigations on, and you can get burnt out really fast, especially if a lot of those end up being revocations where you have to write the packet and there's strict deadlines, like you really can't, there's no procrastinating on those. So I did reach burnout. I would say it was probably about December of last year. I reached a point where I was burnt out, and I went to my supervisor. My supervisor's great about checking on me though too, and he was like, what's going on? Like, you're making mistakes that you haven't made in the first 6 months. And I said, I think I'm tired, I'm burnt out. And so he worked with me to make sure I got the time off. But the department overall is huge on the wellness of agents. Region 2 has wellness meetings for COVID right now. So agents can go and they can do meditations with other agents and with psychiatrist that we have through the department, and just kind of checking in to say, hey, how are you doing? I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys did hear about Kenosha, everything that happened. Like I said, this job is professional, but it's hard not to kind of somewhat, when something happens, you're like, oh my goodness, on the personal aspect as well. So a lot of agents struggled. I was not in the office that burnt down. So I've been talking to agents that have been in the 60th Street office where people did go in the building and set it on fire and burnt it down, and they're struggling. And so the department really rallied together. Agents came together to make sure that everyone was doing okay. 2 people were killed and 1 was seriously injured. I believe the 2 that were killed were the only 2 on supervision by Kyle R. So I mean, that was somebody on someone's caseload. So agents check in on other agents when they know that a client passes away, because like I said, it does impact you. You get to know them on a on a pretty deep level. I mean, they talk to you about things that they might not talk to their family about or others about. So you do get to, you work with them a lot, oftentimes for many years. So you get to know them pretty well. And so when somebody dies or something serious happens, it's nice that agents come together and just make sure that the agent is doing okay.
And kind of to piggyback off what Lisa was saying, 26 years on the job, it can be tiring, stressful. The biggest thing for me that I noticed throughout the years is just how jaded I've become. I'm lied to every day in my job, every single day, day in, day out, not by my coworkers, but by the people I supervise. That jades a person, I know as a parent, I would tell my kids, I'm lied to every day at work. I don't expect to be lied to at home. Be honest with me. Honesty with me goes a long way. So like I said, you just don't trust people, and that's a hard thing, because it's just one of those. It's one of the downsides of the job is just how jaded you can become after 26 years.
And it's amazing what people lie about. It's the silliest, stupidest things that they lie about. You do kind of become cynical at some point. I've already experienced that. But you have to just take a step back and realize that this is your job. You guys are studying criminal justice. I think all of you are probably trying to go for an associate's in criminal justice. So you understand as law enforcement, you're lied to. They try and get out. Those aren't my pants. I mean, that's that joke now too. Those aren't my pants, or whatever else they want to try and say isn't theirs. So whatever drugs were in those pants, I borrowed them from a friend. I mean, honestly, people lie. So as a law enforcement officer, as an agent, you're going to be lied to. I guess the best piece of advice I could provide you with is, one, know your biases. What are you biased about personally? And then make sure that that doesn't work itself into your job. And then two, just let it, when you're done with work, you're done with work. I know it's hard as an agent for me to not think about what I could have done differently that day, or I could have called them out on that lie that time. And it is what it is. You reacted the way you reacted. Just go in the next day and figure it out. But take that time once you're done with work to not think about it.
Right. Big thing is to find the balance.
Yeah.
And you are able to do that. And I would agree with Lisa. Just go ahead and leave the job. Leave the work at work. Don't bring it home. There are internships available with the Department of Corrections. I believe the instructors have that contact information. In Waukesha County, I just learned that we are starting to allow interns back into the office. They're learning right now how we're doing our job in COVID, which obviously if you're going to come into this line of work, and depending on what policies are in place and where COVID's at, you're going to have to know how to do the job during this time. So they open the doors up for that as well. So internships are available. I don't know by you if they're starting back or not, but
no. I did do an internship with Jason Popp in the sex offender unit with an agent for 5 weeks before I got hired in Kenosha. So I had to stop that. If you want to do an internship, I've heard a lot of interns don't like it because they end up doing the paperwork side of things. There is a lot of paperwork with this job, and I think sometimes interns say, wait, this isn't what I want to do. Yes, the paperwork is a lot, but there is a lot of other job duties that I think that it's important if you are going for an internship to ask the agent, hey, can I come along with this, or can I do this? Be honest with them too. If you're tired of the paperwork, just let them know. I think sometimes as agents, we don't want to do some of the paperwork because we have to do it with 25, 30 clients and all new intakes and new prison releases and things like that. So just ask them if you want to do an internship. Hey, you've been giving me a lot of this paperwork. Is there anything else I can do? Because I can promise you that's not the only part of the job is what you might experience as an intern if the agent doesn't allow you to get the whole picture and just kind of uses you to fill in the gap for some paperwork.
Where we're at time-wise. 10:56. The only other thing I'd want to mention, since we have a couple more minutes, is just the good working relationships that I can speak to that we have established in Waukesha County. We have a lot of good working relationships established with a lot of the local police departments. Like I said, I work out of the Heartland Police Department 1 day a week. I used to work out of the Waukesha Police Substation. We have agents that work out of the Oconomowoc Police Department. Out of Menominee Falls, we have 3 agents that are there. New Berlin has 2 agents. Pewaukee has an agent, Muskego and Mugwanago, just to name a few of those. And to have that partnership with law enforcement, it is a huge thing to have. Good to be able to keep the lines of communications open. So it's a great opportunity to have to establish those relationships. Overall, I do like my job. It's been 26 years, and I still like it.
Yeah.
It is a good job. It's not your typical desk job. It's not the same job day in, day out, because everybody that you supervise brings something different. They're all unique. They have their own issues, their own problems, then they bring that uniqueness to your appointment. So it's not your typical desk job, and it's a very busy job, and yes, there is a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah, in Kenosha too, I have a pretty good working relationship with the officers. I deal a lot with just where my caseload's at right now. One gang officer in particular, and then a couple drug officers that I work with a lot. They're pretty cool. Some of them, I can tell you, don't like agents, and they've been jaded by experiences they've had with agents. So some of them are going to be a little bit snippy, but most of the time, you can develop a first name basis with the officers that you end up working with a lot. They end up taking more than one client of yours into custody, so you get that experience of working with officers. In Region 2, I can speak for, I don't know about Region 7 or other regions, we still have cop houses too. So it's just like a typical house. Agents, there's typically, I think, only two or three agents that are in that location. That's where they work out of. I believe they still have staggered hours, so some of them might work a little bit later at night, past the 4:30 timeline. But then there's also an officer at the cop house as well. So in Region 2, they kind of designate the cop houses for the high risk, so the 1010s, which is just a very high-risk individual. They'll be assigned to agents in the cop house. They go to the house. It's basically the same, except for you have an officer there, and it's a different setup, so you don't work with as many agents in the office setting.
A couple other things that we didn't mention yet is some of the other things that we do. We do Halloween home visit checks for sex offenders. We'll go out with law enforcement on Halloween when the Halloween's in the different communities, and go and check on the sex offenders, because they obviously are not supposed to participate in the Halloween activities, having their lights on, handing out candy, that type of stuff. So we'll go to the sex offender houses that we have in the community and make sure that they're not participating. Sex offender rules are super, super strict, more so than generic, if you will, caseload. If a sex offender happens to have their lights on, if they have Halloween decorations up, they are going to be taken into custody on the spot. And we'll go out and pair up, like I said, with law enforcement, because those custodies are happening right away.
And that's when they ask for volunteers with generic agents, because there's not enough sex offender agents to be able to make the rounds for the amount of sex offenders in the community to be able to hit every single house. So they ask for volunteers. That kind of, one thing we didn't touch on is you have to join a committee in order to reclass. So if you start out as entry level, you have to be put on a committee. I mean, we have human trafficking, we have AODA, DV, I think there's so many committees. I don't know the names of them in particular, unless I'm just talking strictly Kenosha County or Region 2. But there's so many committees that you can choose from, and at some point when you want to pick a specialty, even though we really don't have specialties as much anymore, I would say. I mean, we have the sex offender and the Act 100, but I mean, all agents are given female DV, like I said before. So you can kind of still pick what you like and join a committee and kind of work with that. And at some point, STG is my specialty that I'm going towards. With COVID, it kind of got put on the back burner because the training was postponed. So I haven't gone through the training on that, but you go through some training, you have to take a test. If you pass it, you can do security threat group, which ultimately is gangs. So at some point when you have that specialty, you will be assigned more of those cases. So if they know right off the bat that, hey, this guy, he's got gang affiliations, he's marked as STG in one of our computer systems, it may end up going to one of those agents as opposed to just a basic generic agent that doesn't have that specialty.
All right. Anybody have any questions? We got a little bit of time left.
Yeah.
How many people do you check up on on a day-to-day basis?
Right now, my caseload, I have about 25 to 30 active, so that I have to make contact with. We have, on our caseload also, we have absconders, so people who haven't been reporting. They have a warrant issued, but we just can't locate them. So we have those people on our caseload. So if they were to be apprehended on our warrant, we would then, right now they have a stop time. So from the time that they stopped reporting to us, their time isn't going anymore once you get to that point. So if that's the case, once they're apprehended, then we would start their time and start supervising them after we dealt with the violations. So sometimes absconders can end up serving a 30-day or 60-day sanction depending upon how long they've been gone and what led up to their apprehension and what they were doing while they were absconding. But then we also have institution cases, so we are assigned those. So everybody in the institution has an agent that they anticipate coming out to. About 6 months before their release, they get put in pre-release status, and then we talk to the social worker and the inmate during phone calls to kind of get ready for their release, make sure they have a residence, make sure they, if they completed treatment in the institution, that we're not doubling up on that and having them do the same treatment in the community, but to also see what needs they still have. So that starts about 6 months before. I typically try and get 3 phone calls in. Some agents only like to do 2. It really just depends upon the agent's preference, though, too. There's no cookie cutter agent. You get training, but you also get to put your own spin on it. So going back to your question, about 25, 30 for me right now, based on where my points are at, that I see on a regular basis.
And I'd say for me in Waukesha, our caseload is a little higher than what it sounds like it's down in Kenosha. I'm about 40 to 45 active people, meaning that the ones in the community, not including the institution cases that I have, but the ones that I'm actually seeing face to face. About 40 to 45 people. So it fluctuates a lot. It just depends on what's going on in the community. Obviously, it's all based on the courts and when they place somebody on supervision. So caseloads do vary, and they do. I think they do vary by just the geographic regions too that we have.
Yeah. So when we say caseload too, we go off of a point system. So to give you an example, new intakes. So probation cases that came directly from the courts, and we're now having to do an intake on them. They start out at 7 points for 30 days unless they're going to be supervised at medium or maximum, and then we can get those 7 points for 60 days to complete the intake. And then maximum are a little over 3 points for our caseload. So when I started, the average point count was about 185, was you were pretty much average. You could be open to a new intake or new cases. Now I'm hovering right around 215 points. So it really all fluctuates based on intakes. If you have a revocation, you get more points because more time has to be put towards that case. And one of the things that the department doesn't want to do is just assign so much work to one agent that it's impossible to complete all that work. So when we talk about caseload, we do go off of a point system. So absconders are like half a point. Institutions are 1.4 points. So that all adds up to your total point value, and that kind of helps I know when my points drop, I'm getting a new intake, and that's kind of like one of those moments where you're like, okay, I hope that something doesn't happen right after I get an intake, where now all of a sudden I have an intake and 2 revocations that are going on at once, because that's when it gets overwhelming.
A couple last things is, we talked a little bit about the protective status that we have as agents. The job the job can be dangerous. And I mentioned a little bit before about the warrantless searches that we do. That's kind of a fun thing that I like to do on the job, and it is still happening during COVID. Just went out recently to a residence in Merton. We had gotten reports that the offender that I was supervising had weapons. He was a felon, obviously can't have firearms. He never told me he had firearms, shocker. And we go into the residence. It's 2 to 3 agents, depending on how big the residence is and how many hands that you feel you're going to need. Because again, it's a warrantless search. So we are searching through. We have that ability to search through everything. Obviously, that doesn't go over very well with. In this case, the offender was living with his parents. It didn't go over very well with his parents. Living in a very nice subdivision out in Merton. They did not like the fact that you had state cars there and then you had marked squads. Just did not look right for where they lived. We went into that residence looking for firearms based on the information that we had, and we found firearms. So the information that we had turned out to be reliable. Sometimes it's not. So that's, you got to really kind of weigh the information that you get. Again, the person was a felon, not supposed to have a firearm in the house. He had a loaded handgun in his bedroom closet, claimed that he did not know that it was there. He also had 6 firearms down in the basement that were his, according to his father. Father also had firearms in the house, but they all had trigger locks on them. So we confiscated those firearms, took everything, turned that over to the sheriff's department so they could maintain custody of that property for us, the firearms, because we just don't have that ability at our office. Confiscated all the ammunition that went along with it. All of that stuff, when you do it, it's fun. You know, I like that part of it, but there's a lot of work that goes along with it because you have to inventory every piece of everything that you take into custody, because now it's going to be held by us.
Right.
Some home visits that I've went on, kind of the same thing where, you know, you go out and do your home visit. I'm going into the house by myself. The guy's there, sitting there in his chair, talking, doing our home visit. Everything's good. Later on, I get information that, you know, he beat the crap out of his wife. She has been in that relationship for a long time, doesn't want to press charges, but we can go ahead and still, you know, take action on that. We had information that he had firearms in the house as well. Go in with Heartland PD and talking with the Heartland officers before going into that situation. Heartland was very well aware of this individual. He was known in the community. We go into that residence, and they had serious concerns because you know, they had heard that he had a sniper window, and the way the house was set up, it was a sniper window. I mean, it was, law enforcement did not want to go in. We had to go in. We could have I guess we could have, if it was that super, super dangerous, we could have chosen not to, walked away from it and issued the warrant, and hopefully at some point, you know, he would get picked up. But when we went into that house, you know, we go in to do our search, we place him in custody, and in that house, I mean, he did have his sniper window, the way the residence was set up. I mean, he had a clear shot to the front door. He had bulletproof vest, enough for him and his whole family. He had assault rifles. He had a knife, and like the chair that he would always sit in when I'd come by for that home visit, he had a nice size knife tucked away in that cushion. It's just, you know, so you can't get complacent.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. And after a while of doing the job, you do get complacent, but knowing and reflecting on that kind of stuff, that you can't, because you never know. And when you do get complacent is when, you know, bad things can happen. So just don't get complacent. Use your verbal skills a lot, and, you know, treat everybody with respect.
Yeah, and if you have the rapport with your clients, even then you do, like she said, you keep your guard up. But I felt threatened in the community just from people in the neighborhood, not so much going into my client's house. But you get looks. I mean, everyone who knows those vans, or we have a red Impala, they know it's us. It's missing the front license plate, so they definitely know that we're coming, and you get certain looks. I've had some people yell some things out to us when we're in the community, but it all goes back to the rapport. And even with the people you don't know in the community, with the family members that are in their house, there are times they don't like you. They don't want you in their house, and they don't like you, and you just have to use, like she said, those communication skills and still treat them with respect, and you have to understand where they're coming from as well, because it's more than just the client that's impacted by their supervision. All right, any more questions? Yeah.
What's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, like, a client say for an excuse?
Ooh, to name one. Let's see. I don't know if you have one off the top of
Which
your
is the
head.
dumbest thing that
Yeah, you've ever heard a client say as an excuse.
Honestly, I mean, there's so much that
There is.
it's ridiculous, you know, and it's like,
I had a client recently call the front desk on a Saturday asking to speak to my supervisor, wanted to remain anonymous. Now, I don't have many females on my caseload right now, so it was a female. She wanted to remain anonymous, said she couldn't give her location, but wanted to talk to my supervisor, and by the way, my agent's Footlick. So my supervisor calls me on Monday, and he was like, I think I know who this is, because there's certain cases that get bounced around from agents just because they get burnt out on the cases as well. Well, that happened to be one of these cases, and she ended up she was on meth, very paranoid. She tried to say that she couldn't go back to her residence because somebody had rigged it. So a human trafficker had rigged it, and she had to electrocute herself through the grate of the heater grate in the bathroom. And the intensity came from a corded mouse. So she would have to click it and it would light up, and that's how that's how bad the electrocution would be. But then she also realized that there would be knocking on her walls, and that she figured out that she'd have to walk around her apartment, and one knock meant that she was getting closer to where she needed to be. Two knocks, so like the hot and cold game, meant that she wasn't where she needed to be. And so she found a receipt, according to her, for a Speedway gas station, dated same date, future time, and she knew that she had to go to that gas station pump and perform oral sex on the gentleman that would be pumping his gas there for money. And if she didn't, she would have to go back and be electrocuted. Well, she claimed that she was always electrocuted because she was always late because of lack of transportation to do these sexual acts. So they come up with a whole bunch of stuff to try and get out of, for her case, it was an overdose. That was the explanation, was that then she was bad, and so somebody injected her with heroin and dumped her behind a building. And so she did not actually overdose on her own accord. That was not the case, though. But yeah, so they come up with these pretty elaborate stories. Like I said, there's no reason to lie. And honestly, some of these stories you're just like, did I hear that right? Wait, let me back up a minute. Did you say that right? So yeah, there's a lot of things that come out of people's mouths.
And man, I don't have one to top that, so I think we'll just end on that one, because,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
still ongoing.
Anything else?
Yeah.
I have a question about like uniforms. So you guys talk about going into these houses and stuff. Do you guys wear like a bulletproof vest? Do you have a button to press for help?
We have I take my personal phone and my work phone in. A lot of agents I know only like to take their work phone. I take both. I take obviously we have our state ID. It's got to be somewhere. I have one that goes around my neck. We have our state ID, OC spray, and your van key, and that's it. One piece of advice I was given in training is because you go in so vulnerable, because you don't have a whole lot, stand by things that you can use as a weapon if you need to. So like a lamp that you know you can grab or something like that. Always make sure you know your exits. Ask clients to turn on lights. So it's little things like that that you can kind of make sure that you know more of. I know you touched on like uniforms though. We just wear basic clothes. Like some of us have DOC jackets. I prefer not to wear anything with a DOC logo when I'm in the community, just to not draw attention to myself any more than the van already does. But you can wear, some offices let you wear jeans. My office lets us wear jeans, so just basic clothes.
wear jeans.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah.
Revocation hearings, though, you gotta look top notch. So that's when you really have to dress up. Court reviews, you gotta dress up. So you'll know when you have to dress up, but most days you can, as long as you look presentable, it's fine. But no bulletproof vests or anything like that.
The only time that you do get those is, like I said, when we go in to do like at least for our office, when I go out to do a search, I do have that bulletproof vest that I put on. But that's the only normal time that I'd be, wearing that bulletproof vest is during a home search like that, where that risk level is higher. Law enforcement's there with us. They have they're fully geared up. So the bulletproof vest will come into play just on like a home search or something like that. The only other thing that we can carry with, I don't know if you guys can, but we have the OC spray that we can carry.
Yep, we carry those.
So
You can
that's it.
get your own, but then you're responsible to know where it is at all times, or they have some in a cabinet that you can just grab. I chose to sign off on the form, so I have my own, and I'm pretty familiar with how mine works. Yeah.
Can you, if you want to go get your concealed carry? Or
Not on the job. Nope. Technically, I believe it states that if you take your own weapon to the office, it's got to be locked in either the glove compartment or the trunk. So no, it can't come in the office. We have our clients go through metal detectors before they come see us too. Obviously, I'm sure some clients have figured out ways to bring certain things in that get past the metal detectors. But yeah, so nope, not your own weapon either.
Yeah, so even if you do have your own, if you're going concealed carry, you can't carry on the job.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us.